All right, we are live again. We are going to see if we have the ability for Lexi and Sherry to join us so that we can feature her for her local expert chat. And I'm glazing off to the side because I am trying to communicate with them. It's the lovely part of doing these live. Okay, I see Lexi on here. And I see Sherry. All right, we are good to go.
Hi.
Hi. All right, Sherry, I see you on there. You got to accept the invite. Let's try that again.
How's it going?
Hi, it's good. I started it like normal. I don't know why that came out a little bit differently. And let's
Technology.
see. Sherry's on there and has been invited too. Yeah, technology is always going to get you. It's always a thing about these lives that require a little bit of coordination at the beginning. They can be a little funky. All right. Well, I sent an invite to Sherry and hoping that there we go. Perfect.
There she is.
We did it.
Yay!
Sorry for a little bit of tech logistics.
It's okay. It's okay.
Yeah,
it's the world we live in, right?
It is. Yep. And we just got to roll with it.
That's right.
Yeah. Well, I'm so glad you could join us. I'm actually going to kind of redo a little bit. I usually kind of mention some of our upcoming events as I wait for the speaker to get in and settled, but we're going to delete the one that just didn't work and go with this one. And our people who view know to kind of roll with it.
Sounds good to me.
Yeah, but so just a reminder to everyone in the community that Lexi, you should have gotten an email from Lexi that we have our next Mom's Time Out event is published and up. So that one's going to be really cool. It's at AR Workshop, which is like a woodworking project space. And what you get to pick out your project. So it's whatever price point you really want it to be. And they're really nice projects. I've given a few as gifts, like kind of signs for offices or customized like welcome gifts for like people who just bought a home. And I did one for like my son's room. That's a name sign that hangs over his crib. So just things like that. But yeah, just go online and check it out and hopefully you can come and make something cool or give it as a gift for the holidays coming up. Lexi, did you want to add anything for that?
No, that's great.
Cool. Yeah, it's really fun. I've done it a handful of times. But to get into the good stuff, so Sherry Platt, thank you so much for coming on with us today. What an honor to get to spend an hour with you.
Yes, it's an honor for me to be with the two of you. Thank you.
Awesome. Well, and just to intro you a little bit, and obviously I'd like you to elaborate and tell us more about yourself. But, you know, I always like to kind of start with the reason for you sparking our interest and with EverMom. And, you know, we really are firm believers in women understanding their finances and feeling financially empowered. And I think so much of that comes back to what you feel like you're doing for income. And some people choose to be stay-at-home moms and not have an income stream. But a lot of times with that, there's like an expiration time and then they want to get back into the workforce. And then a lot of people are just kind of hodgepodging stuff together and sort of wondering when they're going to figure it out. And that's fine too. But you really stood out as somebody who has an expertise in guiding women, helping them to figure out what they want to do with their life as fulfilling work and as having like a skill set and really a curriculum, more or less, a guided structure to help them achieve that. So that just spoke to my core as somebody who we needed to introduce to our community.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Would you like to share more about, I guess, give us the down low of what exactly you do, the down run? Yeah.
Well, I can start with giving you some background. I think that there are a lot of people who call themselves career counselors and career coaches out there. And, you should definitely pick someone who is aligned with you. But I think it's important to understand my perspective and where I come from. So I was up until a year and a half ago, a recruiter for over 20 years. And mostly I worked for corporations. I started with employment agencies, but then moved into the corporate world. So that gave me a lot of understanding of what goes on behind the scenes and what I look for in resumes, what the interview process looks like, what the prejudice are, the biases is probably a better word, and then how, as a recruiter, I helped to resolve those as well. So there's a very rich background of understanding that piece, right? Then there's the other side, which is, as long as I was a recruiter, I was also a career counselor. And I got into that a little bit by accident, but my first job was as a job developer working with adults who had disabilities. So that ranged from any but dual and triple diagnosis, people with physical disabilities, mental disabilities. So very much, I worked with felons. So it's been a very rich and beautiful career that I've loved very much. And so these two aspects come together inside of me when I'm working with clients. So I have a rich understanding of employers and a rich understanding of candidates. Also, I'm not a proponent of working for employers by any stretch of the imagination. I also like and believe seriously in the entrepreneurship movement and the gig economy. I think it's really important. Mm-hmm. Talk about that for a whole hour if you wanted to. So that's my background. I have my master's degree in counseling. So I emphasize that I'm not a coach. I am a counselor, and I'm not afraid to go deep with people. At the same time, I also know my limitations and when I need to hand people off to professional therapists, especially when it comes to trauma, sexual abuse. So yeah, that's my background.
Yeah, that's amazing that you really can span both sides of it, as you said.
Mm-hmm. Well, there's actually a third side. So the third side is also that I'm a psychic. And so there are two very distinct sides of my business. They're not so distinct. They're blending more and more over time. I also call myself a careervoyant. And so I also tie the recruiting, the career counseling, and the mediumship and psychic into a careervoyant reading or a careervoyant package. So I am finding that more and more people are drawn to that, which is very, very interesting for me to observe, because for a long time I kept it in the background, and the more out I become, the more I find that that's actually what people are drawn to, is working in that intuitive space is very healing and very powerful for people. So, yeah.
Can you tell us more about how that gift that you have as a medium, how that gets translated into helping people find their path? Is it, I mean, I know it's not just as simple as you can sense what they're meant to do, but like, what are some of the things that you tend to pull out of people that really become helpful for them in this process?
Sure. Well, first I can draw a distinction between psychic and medium, which I didn't know. I just finished a 2-year, very intense certified spiritual advisor program. So it's helped me understand my gifts more as well. So I use mostly psychic, although I will use some medium. Psychic is when I actually look into your auric field and I can actually see your past, your present, and a little bit of your future. A good psychic doesn't actually predict the future, but together we can actually see the different options that are available to you that are coming up. I want to be very careful about predicting. Mediumship is more working with people, spirits that have passed and they're on the other side. The way it works when I'm working with people is that while I'm doing a psychic reading, oftentimes ancestors come in, and that is profound because I can see where energetic blocks come from, and then we address them directly. So I'm very intrigued by the question, why don't you know what you want to do? I mean, I've been listening to people talk about their work for a very long time. So I used to do all this. I used to give them Myers-Briggs and the strong interest inventory test, and they're still being given. But as I understand, I also had some weird obsession with neurology. Even when I was in my 20s, I was reading all these books on neural pathways and neurology. And so, of course, now it's public consumption. Everybody's studying about neural pathways. So what I learned is that those tests don't work if we're testing habituated thinking. So if I give you a Myers-Briggs and you're answering from a habituated mindset, you're just going to be, it's just going to be feeding into the tests reflect back what you say to them. So if you're unconscious about your habits of thought, then you're just going to keep getting the same experiences over and over and over again.
Right, because they're self-reported, right? So like in Myers-Briggs, just to give a little bit of context, is like that one that basically says extrovert versus introvert, like feeling versus perceiving. I'm going to kind of make some of these up, but
it's okay.
P or whatever.
It's a Jungian philosophy that was created by a mother-daughter team, Myers and Briggs. So it's value. I'm not saying it's not valuable, because it's an interesting conversation to have, but I don't like to have that conversation with people who haven't really looked at their belief systems. So a cultural belief system is that women have to stay home and take care of children.
Yeah.
So that's a cultural neural pathway. Women taking caretaking jobs is a cultural neural pathway. When I ask women, what do you do or what do you want to do? They almost always respond, I just want to help people, which we get rid of right away, because we're hormonally designed to do that. We have oxytocin in our system. So we are hormonally programmed to want to bond and help. But the culture has put us into, you want to talk about finances, low income, low paying jobs, nurses, teachers, mothers, don't get paid anything in this country. And yet, forgive the analogy, dead, we're worth probably $175,000 if you have a life insurance policy on you. So it's a matter of the cultural neural pathways, including, I could talk to you, and if you want to talk about this down the road, the glass ceiling, which is, of course, there is a real glass ceiling in terms of salary, but there's also a glass ceiling internally. So we have to shatter the glass glass ceiling inside before we can start demanding what we want on the outside. So tying it back into the psychic. So if we go, for those of you who don't want to do the psychic piece, I have the Steps Career Academy. It's a systemized process that helps, I believe, teaches people how to do career change. Like, no one ever taught us how to do career changes. We were just shoved into jobs, or we were shoved into positions, or so I actually teach people, this is how you make a career choice and a career decision. When we go down the path of the clairvoyant, I actually tie in those exercises as well. And in both cases, we look at the habits of thought. So the HOTS, I call it HOTS. The HOTS exercise is part of the system. And the HOTS is also part of the clairvoyant, but I can actually see a lot of your blocks, and not just in present time, but ancestral from both sides of the lineage, for your paternal lineage and your maternal lineage. And so that's super interesting. So that was a long-winded answer to the response. That's how it works. So even in the clairvoyant packages, I'm still blending in psychic readings, but we're still doing exercises to get you the answers that you want. Yeah. So it's still a very tangible process.
That's just fascinating to me. I've actually never gotten to have like a full conversation with somebody who has those gifts and like interests and ability to see that. Can I just like ask also, when you say you can see people's ancestral blocks, maternal and paternal, what does that mean to see it?
Yeah, so that's the way I take in information. I have colleagues that feel it. I can also feel it, but I'm very visual, and spirit speaks to me often in words, which is really interesting to me. So, but I can also feel it. I think recently I was talking to someone, and when I saw their paternal lineage, I could smell tar. That was new. And she said, yeah, he was a roofer. So that was really interesting. So my gift grows all the time. And the most interesting thing about being a psychic is that it teaches you how to trust yourself. Like, if you don't trust yourself, like, the stuff I see is wild sometimes. So if I saw Mary Tyler Moore and Dick Van Dyke at one of my readings recently, and she was holding an orange, and the person I was reading was blown away. And I had to say it because I saw it. It was a very clear picture, and it was on the maternal side. So I just said, okay, this is what I'm seeing. She's like, yeah, that's my grandparents looked like that. And my grandmother made me orange cake all the time. So it was a message from spirit. Yeah, I know. Wow. So if you don't learn to trust yourself, then you're really putting yourself out there when you see images. And so I always tell people, if you want to be a psychic, I do believe in training, because I think boundaries are an issue. What do you tell people? What you don't tell people. But I think also the biggest training is learning to trust yourself, because I see a lot of weird stuff.
So I have no doubt. Well, and I'm just thinking too, like kind of bigger picture and kind of bring it back to more broadly what you do. I would also imagine that you are teaching women how to trust themselves for where their passions really lie and have some confidence in what their natural skills are. And I would think that, whether somebody's interested in more of that clairvoyant path with you or just traditional, that your work
either way
on that theme of teaching people to trust themselves. Because I think we all kind of have a sense of what we're good at, or maybe we don't. And maybe that's back to that question that you said of why don't you know what you want to do, which is a very interesting way to frame it. But yeah, how do you kind of work with people to help them figure that out?
So the first thing I'm going to say is that we work on what's next, never what's in the future, because I think we all get freaked out when somebody comes to me and says, I just want to know what I want to do for the rest of my life. I'm like, yeah, that's not going to happen. So, if you're an evolving, growing, let's take motherhood. Who I was before motherhood is not at all who I am post motherhood. And then who I am as an empty nester, is completely different than who I was as a mom. Calmer, happier, more relaxed. But you transform, you change. And if you're not transforming and you're not changing, then that's also important to look at as well. So this system that I work on, and even the system that whether it's clairvoyant or the academy, it's always like, look, let's just make your next best decision. And for moms, I mean, we are in it for a really long time, and so it changes. Like who you are when the child is under 5 is different than when the child starts, preschool and then starts kindergarten and then starts high school, and I could go into the whole psychological background, which is that your child's ego identity shifts also. So what they require from you shifts, what the time that you have to share with them shifts. So it's constant transformation.
And even who you are from your first child to your second child.
Very good point.
You're a different parent.
And the children are so different. It's like they know that coming in. Like
100%.
Mom will be much more chill this time. So yeah. So it's yes. And so that's what I'm saying is that you don't know. It's I will say to you though that I have worked with so many women are by far there's no men on right now, for our apologies, are definitely who I choose the most to work with, because I feel like, I feel many things. I feel we're the most powerful creatures on the planet. I feel like the planet's only going to survive if we step up, and especially right now. We have to step up right now. There's no more playing small, no more of this humble bullshit we've been taught to eat the whole time. So we're actually being requested by the earth to step forward, and we have to let go of all of our hots, belief systems that tell us to play small, that tell us to be quiet, that tell us to be humble. So that's one thing. And the other thing is from a financial perspective. So I came out at 45 as a lesbian and lost everything, not my children, but my community, my marriage, which was fine because it wasn't very good to begin with. So it was, and then I came out at 60 as a psychic, which was a different experience, but it was similar actually. And so I understand what happens when you make a choice to end a dysfunctional relationship. And often most women will not be in a strong financial position.
Yes.
Right. And I mean, I remember my accountant sitting across from me, and he says he watches women walk away, and most of them end up in poverty. And I walked away from a job where I was making almost $200,000 a year a long time ago. It was a lot of money. But I had a miscarriage. And when I got pregnant again, I wanted to be careful, and I was commuting down south in the tech industry. And I was offered a promotion. And I turned it down. So I would, I'm not sorry about my decision. However, when the time came for me to divorce from a dysfunctional marriage, I was kind of screwed. So I think it's really important for women to not stop working ever, and just to make it work within your schedule. We can figure it out together, but the entire world of work is shifting out of jobs and into the gig economy and into the entrepreneurial mindset. The statistics are that prior to the pandemic, 55 million people were in the gig economy. Post-pandemic, 75 million people are in the gig economy.
Wow.
That's huge.
Wow. Can you elaborate on that? Because I think that, first of all, that statement of the belief that women should never stop working is a strong one. And I always respect strong statements. I'd love to hear more about, what you'd like to say to kind of back that up, because I think that that's probably going to rub some people the wrong way, and other people will fully agree with that. But then I'd also love to hear about, it might not look how we
Correct.
typically imagine it to. And
Correct.
I think that's really where you connected with the gig economy. Yeah.
So the most important thing is that you maintain your skill base. That's the most important. How you do it, even if you don't get money for it, that's okay too. So if you're volunteering, but be conscious about your volunteering, right? Just have a consciousness that you don't lose your skill set. The only reason why I was in my 60s and still a recruiter, which is a young person's industry, and I was making so much money, was because I kept my skills up. Nobody cared about my age. They cared that I knew all the applicant tracking systems, that I knew Asana, which I hated, that all these, I was completely up to date on my technology. That's what made me marketable. But it took a while to get it, right? Because I wasn't in that, I wasn't conscious. I wasn't thinking about that. So when I say don't stop working, it doesn't mean work 40 hours a week. I've worked with men as a recruiter. Many of my hiring managers were women who worked full time in the tech industry, and usually means 60 to 70 hours a week. And they were all breaking. They couldn't do it. And they were sick of it because it's also a patriarchal setup. So, but they just weren't, it was killing them to do it like that. So I'm not advocating that people work full time. I'm advocating that you never let your skill base decline, that you always stay on top. So even if you're doing a fundraising event, learn the software for the fundraising. If you're event planning, if you're volunteering as a parent for the PTA, take on jobs that are going to build up your skill base. Just don't, what you do is irrelevant, just maintain the skill base. So I have no judgment about how we work, how much you work or whatever, but the most important thing is to not let your skills go. And then we can always make your resume. As long as you've been active, I think what happens is it's very easy to get sucked into the mom hole, because it's in the mom rabbit hole, because it's hard. I mean, being a mother is the most difficult job on the planet Earth. So it's really easy to go down that rabbit hole and forget that wait a minute, and to think everything's going to stay the same, but it doesn't.
Yeah.
And it doesn't mean divorce. It could mean death. It could mean sickness. It could mean lots of different things. So that's what I mean. I'm glad you helped me to clarify that.
Yeah. And I'm just thinking too I know some people, and I wasn't super far off of this, but you have a baby, your life changes dramatically. And all of a sudden, you're 1 week in, and then you blink an eye and you're a year in, and then you blink an eye and you're 3 years in, and you're just like, man, I've just been surviving day to day on sleepless night after sleepless night and sickness after sickness. And so all of a sudden you're 3 years in potentially, or however many, but it can be years, and you realize you're out of the workforce and you go, crap. What
I think you want to be careful about staying out too long. So the people I see struggling the most are the people who were just, they had a lot of kids, they were really busy, the partner was never around. So for 10 years, that's all they did. And so that's super hard. But if you want to focus on your kids for 2, 3, 4, 5 years until they're in kindergarten, that's okay. That's not a significant gap, especially if you were working before. What is a significant gap is if it goes past 5 years.
Okay.
But again, even in that 5-year period, you may be able to participate in, I remember all the, this music things that I went to with the kids, and then in the preschool, and just be conscious of it, because I can turn a resume into anything and make it look good. But we still have to have content, right? So what you're doing with EverMom, that's program development, that's program management. You're learning your technology, you're doing outreach, you're doing marketing, you're doing communications with easy peasy. You're going to make a cent from it. It doesn't matter. What matters is you've maintained your skill base. You're learning. You taught me new technology today. So
this makes me very so when I was pregnant with my oldest son, I started my own marketing business for that specific reason. And so much of what you said is resonating with me, because it's so similar to my journey, my professional journey, and how I was in corporate. And I left corporate right after I miscarried, because I didn't want to be in corporate. It wasn't the right fit for me, but I loved marketing. And then I started my own marketing business because I didn't want to lose my skills when I had my children. which was great, right? But then I became a mom, and then those passions shifted into everything that is EverMom now. And so everything that you said makes so much sense and aligns so much with my experience professionally. And what made me think of when you said, to keep your skill set up, it's also too because the world is changing so much, right? So like the marketing that I did 3 years ago is completely different, not completely different, but it's changed in a lot of ways in the marketing I'm doing now, right? For EverMom, right? The social media and things. But like Reels are a perfect example. That was never a thing until 2020, right? And now everything is Reels, everything is TikTok. So it's constantly changing. And if you're out of that loop for so long, I can't imagine jumping back into a world of communications and marketing and not having some type of attachment to those skills throughout that process. So that's such an excellent point. And everything that you have said so far has really resonated with me and my journey up until now.
Yeah. Yeah. I've also, when I was living in California, I worked for a long time with women who were going through divorce. We don't have this here in this state. I've asked, and no divorce attorney has answered my question, but in California, the stay-at-home parent can be mandated by the courts, forced by the courts to go back to work. And that's in very challenging divorces. And so I was a lot of these women, mostly, I think it was one man, but most of these women were referred to me for career counseling. And then we had to go back to the court to tell the court what these women should be doing. It's a really humiliating experience. So, this is how I know all this stuff. I see how difficult it was for many of them. And a lot of them wanted to go back to work. So I don't even think that was the issue. It was more like, oh my God. And MBAs, these are people who are highly educated. These were people who had pretty significant jobs before they had children. So it was just very interesting. That's where I speak from is seeing it and experiencing it personally, right? I mean, it happened to me too. So it took a long time. I'm still recovering from it.
I think it's really cool to point out too about how you're saying that your careers and your passions and your interests change and evolve over time, right? Because the thought of EverMom was never a thing until I had children. So my career and my passion changed and grew into that, right? As I became a mom. And I think when you're younger, right, and when you're in college and you're or whether you go to trade school or whatever you do, you're choosing a career for the rest of your life. But you don't know if you're going to love something for the rest of your life, right? It's a total gamble. And it depends on your journey and how you evolve as a person. And that's such a great point of that, our careers and things change as we get older because our interests change, right? And who we are.
Well, also I actually I'm pretty active on TikTok. And so I occasionally and I offer, and I'll talk about that, a free 30-minute career counseling session. So I get a lot of younger people. And the funny thing is that our children's brains aren't formed. The frontal lobe is not done developing until for girls 26 and boys 28, which I know explains a lot. And so it's so I had 2 boys, I can say it. So to expect our children to know what they're going to do for the rest of their lives is absolutely absurd. So it's I have definitely pissed off many parents of teenage. I mean, especially when I lived in California, and we lived in every area is a wealthy area in California, but they had very high expectations for their children. And when they would ask me, I would say, I don't know, what do they want to do? Like, what do they want to study? What classes? None of this matters. The only time the college degrees or the GPAs really matters if you're going into the STEM, or you're going into medicine, or going into law, or like the ones that, or you want to work for the big consulting companies, then you have to worry about GPAs. But other than that, no. And I have to tell you, more and more and more in the recruiting industry, I went from CEOs and hiring managers only hiring from the top schools, which was totally obnoxious because they also wanted diversity. And you don't find diversity always at these top schools, to opening it up to not caring anymore. So that was really interesting if they have the experience, I'll interview them. If they went to coding camps, I don't know if that's a thing here, but right. So, they used to only want bachelor's degree in communications, master's in computer science, master's degree. And now they're like, well, if they go to coding schools and graduate, we'll take them.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
I tried to get them to do that 5 years ago and they wouldn't do it.
Mm-hmm.
So, but that's okay. It shows, it shows the demand of the marketplace and that employees have more power than they even know.
And I would also potentially argue it shows the disconnect maybe between higher education and what is actually needed in the workforce. And that even goes back into the conversation about growing and evolving with what you want to do as you go, because even if you are past that stage where your frontal lobe's fully formed, you're 35, 40, whatever, the thing is like, you don't really know how a job is until you're in it. And it's more also than just, so, and then you can't just know a week in, you have to kind of dig your feet in and get a sense of it for however long that means to you. So, and then it's more about just the field. And sometimes it can just be about the people who you're working with and how you're working with. There's a lot of factors that can change people in and out of what they're doing too.
Well,
that
there's
even apart from brain, like frontal lobe development.
Absolutely. Yeah. So also, let me just say real quick, because I believe the statistics is 4 out of 5 women have been sexually abused. So if you look at the career development model, we were talking about different stages of identity growth, right? So career development starts at 14, right around 14. And the reason is that because our brains are in a place where we have separation from our parents. We're identifying more with our the other teens. What is the word I'm looking for? People in the same age group. And so they identify more that way and they start to pull away. And right around then they get a sense of mortality. And this is when they begin to think about, oh, hey, how am I going to support myself financially? And it may not be a full conscious, but between the ages of 14 and 30 on the career development model, is just a period of exploration. That's it. That's all any of us should be doing. But it gets interrupted. So it can get interrupted from cultural belief systems, and often it gets interrupted from trauma. So if there was sexual trauma, if there was physical abuse, if there was a bad divorce, if there was bullying in school, if you were gay, LGBTQTI, all of that, if you were that but not out, then or out and bullied, all of these things can interrupt healthy career development. And so this is like people wake up at different points in their lives. The number one client base for me for a long time were 45-year-old women. I did no advertising, but they were 45-year-old women, and they were like 5 years here or 5 years there, because it's like, I actually talked to a doctor about this once, and Dr. Christine Northrup has a theory that as women begin to go into menopause, their estrogen levels drop, their testosterone levels rise, and they go like, who have I been? Who am I? Like, what have I been doing? It's like they kind of wake up. So this ties into the conversation that there are so many factors that affect how we think about work. So I can literally sit across from a woman and know in 5 minutes, based on how she describes her work environment, if she has unhealed sexual trauma.
Wow.
Yeah. And unfortunately, I'm almost never wrong. I mean, I bring it up. I'll say, I'm hearing flags. I just want to share with you some of the things I'm hearing. Let's just touch base. And they're like, how did you know? It's like, because if you didn't heal it, it's still present, and it affects your career environment, your working relationships. Let's not even talk about how many narcissistic bosses we all tend to work for, right? So it's much bigger than anybody thinks about.
And so just to kind of paraphrase that to make sure I'm like understanding that point accurately. So in the years between 14 and 30 is like an exploratory phase for people. And really tragically and unfortunately, that's also a time frame for women where that's probably, if you were to plot all the instances of sexual assault and abuse, probably most of them get plotted in that period. And so that earlier, but they're carrying them. So somebody who is in that age range, that's probably you see the most, just awareness of, or having like,
or they can't understand why they keep having the same experiences over and over and over again. That's really why people often come to me. It's like, I keep picking the same bosses. I change jobs. I change careers. I keep having the same experience over and over. The bosses try to dominate me. I feel like I have no choice. I feel like I have to perform. I feel like, and there's key phrases. And so, and again, it doesn't have to be just sexual trauma. It can be any kind of untreated trauma. And so, And so what happens though, is that sometimes women in particular, children of alcoholics, especially the oldest child of an alcoholic, is so busy taking care of the children, they don't have any exploration period. So it's like you wake up at different periods, you make different decisions at different times. And so it's, so when they come, it's like, I don't even know why I made these choices. Or they don't, it's very interesting. We don't look at, for me, my philosophy is that work is our medicine. Work is our medicine, and we heal through our work. And we heal ourselves first, and we heal others second, if we have a consciousness around it. You can take your trauma and turn it into power. You can take your trauma and turn it into skills and into and being super effective and being able to hold a lot more than other people can, because so
absolutely. What a beautiful way of thinking of that. I don't know if you've read, Oprah Winfrey has a book called What Happened to You, and they talk about post-traumatic wisdom.
That's it. I know there's a whole new consciousness around it now. And I think it's post-traumatic wisdom. There's another term for it also. And I think that's true. You have to allow yourself to be healed, or be on the healing journey to have that. Otherwise, these are the people who come to me, and I end up sometimes have to refer them out. I'm saying there's too much. You should be working with, or we can work in conjunction with the therapist at the same time. But you've got to heal from this. So, or at least identify it so that you can see what's happening around you. Yeah.
So Sherry, I have a question. So my boys are very young, but for when my boys get older, I'm thinking, right, because we put so much pressure on as a society for kids, you go to school, and if you go to college, how are you? I'm very stuck on this that you said, pushing our kids to figure out what they want to do for the rest of their lives, right, and what direction they want to go. So what would you say, because I agree with you 100% that it is such a big decision to make at such a young age, to know when you're in that exploratory phase. So what would your advice be to parents who have kids that are maybe, in middle school or high school, that are starting to think about those big decisions they have to make when they graduate? What do you think to not know what you want to do, but to at least start taking steps forward?
Well, first of all, I don't think kids really think about it. I think parents put pressure on their kids to think about it. So I want to say that. And they do have to take care of themselves financially. So it's not a point. It's just that I actually tried very hard to not ask my children what they want to do. It's more like, that's so interesting that you're interested in that. Elijah, my youngest one, is a very interesting fellow. So he's complete artistic creative, and I just followed him. And he showed us what he was interested in at a very young age. He started cooking. He really, and not even at home, he took cooking jobs, and we even tried to talk him out of working so much, but he loved it. It was good for him. And he's a chef in New York now. So, so I think the question is to observe and to ask questions. We're so good at telling our kids things. Let's just ask questions. That's really interesting that you're interested in that, right? So tell me what you like about it. Be curious about your kids. And also, how old are your children?
3.5 and 15 months.
Yeah. So they have been born into a completely different world than me,
100%,
than you. So they're going to have unique learning ways. They may be considered on a scale. They may be neurodivergent, whatever that means, right? It's that they're being born into an entirely different energetic space, into a whole new world that doesn't make any sense. And it's really important to provide a safe container, right? Because children need safe containers so that they can explore. The reason why we're talking about these clients who had trauma is that they never had the safe container to explore. They didn't have a healthy attachment. So if we give our children a healthy attachment, and we notice what they're good at instead of what they're not good at, and give them opportunities. I believe in allowing our kids to work. I think it's important that, yes, school is important, but there's one of the things that women struggle with a lot. It's called efficacy. I don't know if you're familiar with this term, but efficacy is the sense that you can do anything, or that like, I'll figure it out. Like this, like, yeah, I may not know how to do it, but I'll figure it out. Women really struggle with efficacy because we've been told no so many times. Boys, not so much, but they can. I mean, they can. So what we want to build up is their efficacy, the feeling that they can make it, that they're solid, and that they have a solid attachment to you. Not suffocation, but not helicopter, but trust in them. So I would say ask questions and get rid of that "what do you want to be when you grow up" thing, because that's just not helpful at all. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I love that. It does. It does. And that actually kind of confirms what my wife and I have always said, that we don't think it's our job to tell our kids who to be, but it's their job to show us, and it's our job to guide them based off of what they show us. So that really just like kind of confirms that as a mom for me. It's so strange that everything you're saying is just very much aligned with thoughts that have been in my head or things that I have done in my life up until now. It's very
well. It's not. It's the collective. I mean, we could have a very deep conversation on what's actually happening right now, but there is a collective conscious, and you know, our kids are being born into such a hard world, honestly. So it's just gonna. You know, when my oldest went to school, he wanted, I swear to God, I think we raised him too much on comic books. He said that he imagined himself like Bruce Wayne, holding a glass of scotch and staring out in a condo on the 35th floor going, "Yes, all this is mine." And then, where did you get that from? So he went to college studying political science, thinking he was going to be a lawyer. He said to me he wanted to be a lawyer. I said, "Oh God, why?" And he said, "Well, you must be the only Jewish mother who's telling me not to be a lawyer." I'm like, "I would do that. We're freaking miserable." They said, unless you do like public defense, they tend to like their work more, but they don't. You know, as long as you're okay, like if you're doing it to make money, that is the wrong path to take. Plumbers make more money. So if you're looking to make a lot of money, there are lots of things you can do. So after 2 years, he decided to try to become an EMT, and he went for he's a nurse. Who called that one? He did like to watch Scrubs a lot when the Scrubs reruns. And my wife at the time said, "He's going to be a nurse." I'm like, Sam? Sam wants to be like a politician, but he wraps up nursing school in December and he loves it. And he works for a children's hospital in the emergency room.
That's
right.
Cool.
But it makes sense because he's very kinesthetic. So we don't talk about that enough. So our kids are often identified as ADHD, and I'm not saying that's not a thing, but often it's also that they're just highly kinesthetic and they need to use their body. They need to run, move, they learn through touch. So I watched Sam. That made sense that he would want to be in a situation where he's moving and he's helping and he's kind of a superhero still. So, so be careful the comic books you let them read. So
I keep thinking about the kind of like balance that we all have to achieve between like nurturing and pushing forward people like our kids and ourselves, like positive attributes and like natural strengths, and the balance you have to achieve too with like helping to raise up our shortcomings or weaknesses. Because there's a school of thought out there that really is just screw your weaknesses, go full force with your strengths. And then there's another, and I think it's a much more like societally accepted, or maybe just more how we have been thinking as a society of you have to focus on raising up your weaknesses. And I don't know if you have any like in the sense of, well, like in school, you're not taught to be a straight A student in 2 subjects and fail the others, right? You're taught to keep a balance. I mean, it's a pretty like
well, no, aren't kids taught to make straight A's in everything?
Yeah. Well, that's
like, the way colleges accept them.
Exactly. And so like that is kind of like the idea put in to our kids at a young age is like, okay, anything you're not good at, we need to work on, and you need to work harder at. And I do think there's some merit to that, but I also think in the real world, it's a little bit more about leaning into your strengths and really capitalizing on those, because you can outsource your weaknesses. I mean, my husband's a great example of it, and he talks openly about it, but he's dyslexic and, reads at an elementary school level, and he's found a lot of success in what he does because he just doesn't deal with the reading and writing as much, or just realizes, hey, doesn't have to be spelled perfectly and doesn't have to be communicated perfectly. Like there's a good enough, because that's not what the whole job is, right? He's in construction. The rest of the job is a whole lot more important than like the spelling of certain words.
Yes.
So I don't know. I'm curious if you have any like light to shed on that in your work with people on, kind of making up for the weaknesses versus propelling their strengths forward.
I swear to you, I don't think in terms of strengths and weaknesses.
Okay.
I think I don't draw delineations that way. I think it's more like, when I work with people, when I work with young people, I don't usually work for them for long. I just sort of let them do their thing, and they say, I'm here for you if you have questions, but let's just notice. What I said to the young woman yesterday is, notice she'd taken 16 credits and all of them in STEM classes. And I asked her why, and she said, because her advisor told her. I told her advisors are idiots, not to listen to them. So, and to trust herself. And if it was too much, to back off. Like it was she just left home, all this stuff. So I don't think in terms of strengths and weaknesses. I think I just go back to the same thing. Like, what are you drawn to and what are you enjoying? Now, reading is an essential. I mean, we have to be able to read. So if they can't read, then we have to help them to read in order to function in our society. And if it's a challenge, like in your husband's case, I work with a lot of people who learn how to read with dyslexia, but what haunts them is feeling stupid still. Right. And so there's a sense that because everybody's comparing strengths and weaknesses, that because he couldn't read at the exact right time in the exact right way, the message is he was dumb. And if his teacher didn't give him that message, his friends did, right?
Yep.
Or he did, or the message at home was. And so even if after he recovers and he's learned how to read, there's still that voice in the back of him that says, you're kind of stupid, right? So it's all about how we just address this concept of what we're strong in and what we're weak in. So I think I just, I hate that question on interviews. I never ask the question, what are your strengths and what are your weaknesses? I do say, what do you excel at? Because I don't really care what their weaknesses are. And that's just a dumb question. I do have it. I do have the answer. I create, on the Steps Career Academy, I have a career clarity program that people can walk themselves through. And I just launched my job discovery program as well, which is 10 videos, online videos that answer most of the questions people have. I try to make it as affordable as possible because I'm expensive when you work with me. So I try to give people options that they still have the information they need, but at a much more affordable rate. So that's my answer. I think with Elijah, I knew he liked to cook. So one day we went to go get a slice of pizza at our favorite place, and he had just turned 15, so he was legally able to work. And I just asked, I said, hey, are you guys looking for help making pizza? And they're like, yeah. And I said, Elijah, would you like that? He goes, yeah. That was it. And he started to make money, so it wasn't a push. It was like, hey, dude, do you like to make pizza? You want to learn how to do it here? And he's like, yeah. And that was it. It wasn't strength. It wasn't weakness. And I suspect, and he does too, that Elijah's on the scale, but it's also been his incredible gift at the same time. The ability to focus, the ability to, oh my God, create is just extraordinary. So,
yeah, I often think, like with my own kids, that it's really about like helping them find their passions and equipping them with the tools to have like a good sense of discipline and hard work and like good work ethic. Like work ethic paired with passion, I think is like.
What does that even mean, though, a work ethic?
Well, you show up on time, you're communicative, like just some like really basic things, which honestly, it's not a given with everybody in the workforce.
That's true.
So, just kind of understanding some professional norms and what it means to have some grit, to not give up too easily, to persevere. Just that kind of skill set is what I think about when, and by no means am I, a career counselor, have any like sliver of the knowledge that you have on it. That's just how much my mind's made sense of it, is help them develop passions, just nurture that and equip them so that they can be successful in pursuing that.
Some of the most interesting clients I have is the ones that come from extraordinary wealth. They lack so much, and they know it too, because they didn't have to push, they didn't have to, and they will openly admit to me, like, I almost had too much money, and as a result, I have no direction. There's perpetual guilt. I mean, it's fascinating to work with people who weren't exposed to the workforce early. I had my Sam I had in a summer camp. as a summer camp counselor.
Mhm.
And it was, so he had a good time, but he was still, he had
Mhm.
responsibility. And yeah, so I agree with you completely. I think I am cautious about the term work ethic, because the Western work ethic
Mhm.
is based on suffering,
Mm.
right?
Yeah.
So it's based on the idea that you can only make money if you suffer. You
Yeah.
can you can
Yeah.
only be successful if you work to yourself to death. So, you have to tolerate dickhead bosses. You have to, right?
Mhm.
It's and all that is going away, right?
Yeah.
Mhm.
Because it's counterproductive, and it's not what life is really about. But the
Yeah.
Western culture, it was raised that way. So I'm just careful when people say work ethic, that we define your work ethic is healthy.
Yeah. Well,
And
and
also,
maybe it's more a little bit about that self-efficacy that you were talking about, just this kind of
exactly right.
belief that like I do have the skill set that I can figure stuff out. And I could see
Mhm.
how people who've been raised with a lot of wealth would lack that and even have come in contact with that at some points in my life, because things are really easy when you have money to figure it out, but they're not as easy when you have to get creative and hustle to figure it
Yes.
out. And
Yeah.
that's a good skill set. Being creative and hustling is a great skill set that
Mhm.
teaches you self-efficacy as well.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Agree
It's
completely. That's a good distinction. Yeah.
it's making me think of too. Both of my parents are teachers, and I remember growing up, it just wasn't really an option to think of something besides college. Maybe it's because my parents were teachers, but I remember when my brother graduated college, he was 3 years older, and my parents were like, "Okay, you're gonna go to college, you're gonna do this." And my brother's like, "No, I don't want to. Like, I don't want to. It's gonna be a waste of money. I don't want to. I'm not going to do it. I'm going to join the Air Force." And my parents were both like, "What do you mean you're going to join the Air? Like, that's not the plan. That's not what." And it was the best decision he ever made. And even still now as adults, my brother, he joined the Air Force. He became a pilot. My brother is now a very successful pilot. He just got his dream job, like the highest level of pilot that you can be in the entire world. The thing that he's always wanted to do when he played flight simulator as a kid, right? Like, it
Wow.
is his true dream job that he did, and he got there in his own way. And I admire that so much. And so what I'm thinking of, I think now as a parent, when I'm thinking about my boys and like the future they're going to take, is I think reminding myself too, like, college is not the answer for everybody. It's not the only way to a career. There's a lot of student loan debt that comes with that. There's a lot of things that come with that. And there are a lot of people, my wife, for example, she doesn't have a 4-year degree. She's a very successful, woman in the career world, and she does not have a 4-year degree, right? She has an associate's degree. And so I think too, it's important to remind ourselves that, having kids, there's so many ways to go, and it's not just college. It's not just a 4-year university to do this, but there's trade school. My mom's godson is a very successful welder, and he went to trade school, and it's an incredible field to be in, right? There's so many different ways to be successful, and it's not always associated with, and that's something that I've had to like reteach myself as an adult, because having parents that were teachers, like my mom has her PhD, and it's always been like school, like this is the mindset. But being married to my wife and seeing my brother now, just like looking at my friends and my family and people, I'm like, wow, there's so many ways that you can go to get to a successful career, and it looks so different for everyone, and it's really cool. And I don't think we have those conversations enough about the different ways that we can get there and the different ways we can steer our kids how to get there.
Absolutely. And I have to say, I mean, the pandemic put the brakes on a lot of that. And it's not the first time. If you look historically at pandemics, like the Black Plague completely changed the economic system for the feudal system. Because, when the kings of the land wanted you to come back and work, and the serfs were like, don't feel like it, because they were all dead. So it's like they had, we'll the land back. Nah, it's not really my land. Actually, you own it. But if you pay me, I might think about coming back. So, and I had so many people who were saying things to me off the cuff. I don't think they knew who they were talking to. Like, yeah, the pandemic made people lazy because they didn't want to go back. They don't want to go back to work. And I said, no, that's not what happened. People didn't want to go back to shit jobs. So it's like they were crap jobs before, and they're still, and they took a break, and they were like, no, wait a second. So I can work from home. I can do my own thing. I can do this. I can put my art on Etsy. I can put my music on a variety of sounds, right? There are more ways to make money as a creative person now than ever. You don't need to go to a publisher to write your books. You don't need to, it's like, this is the best time to be an artist ever. So trade schools are extraordinary. They can go to community colleges and learn landscaping and plumbing and electrician and I guarantee you they make just as much, if not more, as the lawyers don't make that much money. That was always an illusion. And they have to work their butts off, and it's just so this is the beauty of what's happening now. It's breaking down these paradigms, and that's why I say when we say work ethic, your work ethic description is fantastic. You want your child to feel confident, to have efficacy, to have integrity, to show up when they say they're going to show up, to ask questions, to not accept things on. I always taught the boys to ask, can I do this? Don't ask me, ask them, ask the question, right? And now they ask. I did get a couple of notes from teachers that they asked too many questions, so we have to pull it back. But when I asked Sam why he asked so many questions, and this is, I think, like in second grade, he said, "I'm afraid to make a mistake," because it was such an honest answer, right? And it was the environment of the classroom. Like that was not encouraged to try things and make mistakes. So that was a really interesting conversation. If you ask kids, they will tell you stuff. They will tell you.
They'll tell you stuff that makes you think a little more.
Yeah, and your brother may not have taken the path of the education, but your parents did something that made your brother know himself well enough to put the blocks on and to pursue. Like something happened in there. It could be
100%.
Yeah,
100%. And for both of us, my brother's gay also, and and for him, my mom always jokes. She's like, I only make gay children, apparently, but. My brother, when he left, a lot of that was because we grew up in the South, right? And neither one of us came out, right, until we were, in our 20s. And for him, it was very much needing to heal exactly what you said, needing to heal the trauma of being closeted his entire life, figuring out who he was while following his passion. And it's so amazing to me. I can genuinely say there's a couple people in my life who really love what they do. Just love it to the core of their being. And that is my brother. Flying planes is ingrained in him. It is just who he is. He lives and breathes. He loves it. So
I definitely, that's a conversation for another time, but I do believe that we come in ingrained with what we're supposed to do. Yeah. So, and I do know that there are ways that we can reveal it, but I really admire, there are career development models for all kinds of different people. There's career development models for LGBT. There's career development models for athletes. Athletes work in a whole different world than, especially these athletes who start in school, like with the Little League, and then they go into, they have a completely different mindset than a non-athlete, There are career development models based on race, based on ancestral trauma, based on trauma. It all, everybody grows and develops in a different way. And so as I say is that, and I don't know if my brother's also gay. So my parents also grew gay children.
There's so many parallels here. It's so wild.
But it does affect, if, I ask a question to my LGBT clients, if you weren't gay, what jobs would you have picked? Because sometimes gay people won't pick traditionally gay jobs, even if they want them, like hairdresser. Right? So I'm like, I want to be a hairdresser. Well, then why aren't you doing that? Because it's a gay job. Okay. So saying so all these boxes that people keep putting themselves into. So in this case, it is fascinating. This is why and I have no desire to retire. This conversation, why would I stop doing this ever? Right? I have no desire.
It's amazing. Yeah. I had no idea that there were all those different models, like you said, for all these different populations. That's fascinating too.
Well, my thesis in graduate school was because I was working with felons who were dual and triple diagnosed. And so I was looking at how early drug and alcohol addiction affects career development. And I wasn't out yet, the only professor they could get to, what is it when they advise you? Was the guy who was creating the model on gay career development, right? Because it was the same thing. When you came out is when you started to truly become who you are is when you truly start your career begins to launch.
Mhm.
So because you're not hiding anymore. So we have to use a similar model. So that was ironic given I wasn't out yet, but
Yeah.
world works in mysterious and lovely ways. So
Well, I just love that on kind of like a note of wrapping up is like, the work that you do and like strive to achieve with your clients is helping to be their most like full and authentic selves, because most of us have to work in some capacity. All of us, you would argue, should be working. I would probably make that argument as well, just to like engage that part of our brains and that type of interaction and contributions. And so I think I've really, really enjoyed this conversation.
I have too. This has
Such a
been
wealth
wonderful.
of knowledge. I can't thank you enough for your time. Can you make sure, can you just briefly state again, like where our community can find you and the resources?
We'll make it really easy. Just go to sherryplatt.com. That's it. And it's got my, it's got the Steps Career Academy, which is where for the people who aren't interested in the psychic piece, you can take the Career Clarity course. You can take the job discovery program. You can also work with me. I offer an 8-package session if you want to do private career coaching. And then if you'd like to do the Careervoyant, you can get the information there too, and you can reach me through the page. And I do offer a free 30-minute career counseling session. So sometimes I can get a lot done in 30 minutes. I had somebody say to me the other day, I thought you were just going to try and sell me. Like, you definitely solve this problem in 30 minutes. So, and sometimes it does lead to, and sometimes like the other day I told somebody they didn't need a career counselor just yet, the young woman. And sometimes it does lead to clarifying how I can help. But also Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, and TikTok. TikTok's a weirdly great place. I get most of my clients of all ages from TikTok.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's very interesting. And I enjoy it. It's fun too. But any one of those, it's Sherry Platt Career Guru on Instagram and on TikTok.
Okay, I will try to remember that and type it into like the comments below, but you're in the community now. If you want to type in any of that so that people know where to get you, that would be fantastic. It'll be a little bit after this like loads up.
Yeah, I saw that you had questions here. I didn't see them before.
Oh, there's one. Donica said, I wonder if Sherry has a career question for you.
Oh. Well, we're done, right? So we're 5 minutes over. That was a good one. I like that one. I wish I would have seen it. But I can leave you with a question to think about, right? Yeah. Which is, let's see. I guess the question is, what stops you from doing what you know you're meant to do? And if you do, I mean, even if you think you don't know what you're meant to do, you kind of do. But what stops you from believing? Because remember, by the 3rd session, most people go, well, I know what I want to do, but, right? Mm. Right. And so what's your but? What's your big but in the world in Pee Wee Herman? Everybody I know has a big butt, right? So what's your big butt?
I love that.
Yeah. And so just remember, you can learn more at sherryplatt.com also. So
can I take a picture really quick?
Yeah.
I want to take a picture of all of us.
That's good.
Yeah. All right. Ready?
Ready?
1, 2, 3. Awesome.
Thank you so much. Love the work you're doing. If I can come back and help in any way, I'm happy to do workshops.
Awesome.
Seminars. Yeah. Moms returning to work. That was a popular one when I did it also. So anything around that, how the resume should look, questions I can answer, forums. If you want to bring more moms on next time, I'm happy to do that as well.
Awesome. I love it. Such a great resource. Thank you so much for your time.
Great. Thank you so much, Sherry.
Thank you.
All right. Have a wonderful day.
Bye.
Bye.